Great. Before that was a quick thing. Hello, everyone, again. I am Shruti Mukund, the Director of Community Engagement here at Olney Theatre. Community engagement at Olney Theatre engages communities that surrounds us, specifically those that haven't historically felt represented or welcome at Olney. I've spent my time here since June in understanding who the community really is that come to Olney, what they love about our theatre, and how we can extend that same welcome and service to others. So the tradition of behind-the-scenes events began to give our patrons and those in the community an opportunity to contextualize the shows we produce. We want you to understand why we picked the play over and beyond the brilliant artistry that you just watched this afternoon, while highlighting themes that resonate with us and the surrounding communities. The Joy That Carries You examines the radical and not so radical differences in privilege and experiences of its two queer protagonists, an African-American woman named Alaia and an Ashkenazi Jewish-American woman named Shiri. The fault lines in their relationship echo fault lines in contemporary Black Jewish community relations, which demand investigation in the wake of our country's racial reckoning and its rising anti-Semitism. We are here to explore this very important topic with our expert panelists, Meredith R. Weisel, from the Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League, and James Stove, the Director of Montgomery County Human Rights Commission. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
The long-standing allyship between Blacks and Jews has been tested in recent American history. Our aim today is to deepen understanding the complexities while building bridges between communities. One of the biggest challenges we face is our own misunderstandings about what racism is and how it works. Only by exploring systemic racism and the root cause of white supremacy can we actually understand how to combat racism in America effectively. So before we get into the actual conversation, there are a couple of things I want to do. One is like go over like a community agreement of sorts, that we're all on the same page and we're getting into this conversation with sort of similar intentions, because as we all know, we have our personal emotions, but there are these difficult conversations we're going to have about things. So I would just encourage all of you not to just expect and presume things before it's being uttered, and then we just honor and give space when people are speaking, and there's the whole being present, and then speak your truth and let others speak theirs. Let's not take this to speak for somebody else, but what we know for ourselves. And then no one knows everything, but together we know a lot. And we're not fixing, we're not saving, but this is just a discourse to increase understanding. And personally, if there's something we can do, each of us tomorrow, that'll be great. And then let's turn judgment into wonder. And we're all human, not perfect. And expect and accept non-closure. So it's not like we're going to check the box and like, done, going home now, we've understood everything. We're always in learning. So, and then the other thing I'd like for both Jim and Meredith to do for us today as we get into the conversation is go over a few terminologies that we keep hearing and the sort of buzzwords as they've changed over time, but let's get to the actual meaning of each of these things. So the biggest word is, can either of you or both of you talk about how you define racism?
Racism is a systemic look at how we deal with all the issues relative to us as a society, moving in and out of those things that we require on a daily basis to do. It impacts all of our thinking. It impacts in how we distribute resources. It impacts where our priorities are. It impacts policies. And at the end of all of it, basically, is the issue of how we look at folks who are, in this instance, color. Color predominates everything, in my opinion. And you can go from culture to culture, and I've got family members who happen to be Puerto Rican as an example. And the darkest member of that family is not regarded as the same way as the lighter member of that family, as an example. And so it is that sort of piece that's throughout everything that we do. And I believe that for me, it is trying to sort of work back through. I don't get ahead of myself, I got so much I want to share, but anyway, so it's a huge concept, but I want to make sure that it's clear that I'm saying it is systemic. It's not just something you can put on and take off. It is there with us and an integral part of everything that we do as a society. That's how I'm defining it.
So I would agree with everything, and I would say, and I think we need to even go back to a very basic definition, something that we teach kids. You know, as adults, sometimes we forget throughout life, and we need to go back to the basics. We're talking about unfair treatment of people of a particular race. It could be any color, as Director Stowe mentioned. It can be systemic, because systemic racism is actually one of the biggest problems that we have in our society, and I think we're gonna delve into some of that. But when you think that one color or race is better than another, and there's an unfair treatment, a mistreatment, you know, that's what we teach our kids, to be kind to each other. So I think we need to even just go back to the basics in many ways, which is something that a lot of us have forgotten in society. So I would agree with everything, but I want to even bring us back to the very basics of what we're talking about.
Then, how about anti-racism?
The opposite. So no, I'm joking in some ways, but you know, a lot of what we've been talking about in society is how to be an anti-racist. A lot of that we're talking about allyship. So, you know, we talk about speaking up, speaking out, you know, not being a bystander, being an upstander in many ways. So anti-racism comes in many different forms, but the bottom line is that when you see something, you know, they say in the security world, when you see something, say something. That is something that I think we need to remember. When you see something and you know, or you hear somebody say something, if it's in person, if it's on social media, if it's in a classroom, if it's in a theater, wherever it is, you need to be an anti-racist, but it is not easy. There are a lot of people who have to be untaught things that we were taught for many years. So again, going back to the basics, you know, the way we have to think back to the way we used to teach, or we do teach kids, and try and form a new path moving forward.
I can boil it down, I guess, in my own mind to, I just remember this growing up. When you're anti-racist, you do unto others as you have them do unto you. That's what you do. You look at the world around you in a way that allows persons to come in as their whole self, into the discussion, into the job, a workplace, into your community as a new resident, in your place of worship, where you in fact socialize. When he or she is able to come in as a whole person, as they are, you are probably illustrating the best way to be anti-racist. Now, I have to say this. Now, there's no way that anybody can say, in my opinion, that you don't see color. That's not what I'm talking about. Because folks, there's no way, when you look at me, that you can say that I'm not Black. I just don't think that's possible. I think that you may see other things, right? So you did not allow me to come as my whole self when you say you don't see color. So when I'm being anti-racist, I believe, then that's the opportunity then to illustrate through that very early on taught sort of like primer for many of us, right? Playground talk, right? You know, treat folks like you want to be treated yourself in that regard. So that's what I think it means from a practical sense. It has a very different, long drawn, probably definition. But I'm really hoping we can talk about practical things today.
And then can we talk a little bit about colonialism?
Okay.
Just like an overarching thing that kind of then we can filter down to white supremacy here in America, sort of thing, like
Actually,
global versus thing. Because I mean, I think honestly, if you talk about colonialism could take its own speech. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if we should focus more on white supremacy versus colonialism for this conversation, but go ahead, that's okay.
The only reason I bring in colonialism is that this because of the Holocaust and how that sort of reflects back to the US with.
Sure.
That's sort of.
Yeah, so I would look at it more from a political control then. Okay, that's what I was trying to understand. So I think when you look at, hard economic times, if you look back to what happened during World War II, the way, what was happening in Germany, what was happening a lot of, in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, just in general over there. So I think when one party in particular, if we want to look at it from that sense, the political power over others, and then starts making policies and laws and things that essentially are a form of racism or anti-Semitism. A lot of the isms and phobias is how I would present it and stuff. So I would look at it in that sense if you want to look at it from the Holocaust perspective.
It was probably, and I still believe, the most horrendous act ever done to mankind, in my opinion. It is such that there is only one way for which life to be lived, and in quote, how to define civilization. It's amazing that the continent of Africa produced the greatest civilizations of the world, but it was uncivilized when folks went there to colonize many of the various nations, not just state nations in the continent of Africa. And that's the other thing too, we've even made Africa be a country. Africa is a what? Continent. And there are countries in Africa, but we have now, and look at it on the map, by the way. Look how small it is in terms of landmass compared to everything else. And so we, even with how we look at it, we have somehow another, in my opinion again, I keep saying that because it's important to know, I'm not speaking to anybody else other than Jim still, I think what the rules were today, right? To speak for me. But in that instance, we took away, or tried to take away all of the things, the cultural pieces, language, and all the things that made us who we were around the world, as a matter of fact. Because evidently there was one way to think about things. And what a travesty in our civilization, in my opinion, for that to have occurred. We lost so much in terms of the authenticity of peoples around the world. And as a result of that, we end up now trying to kind of fix things that are just very difficult to go back there and try to undo some things. And every country across the continent of Africa is still suffering from the colonization of those particular countries many, many years ago. And I think I've got this right, so don't quote me on this, because I'm trying to remember so I've got this exactly correct. Because I've got a good friend who is one of our building maintenance persons, who's from Cameroon. And I believe it was the Dutch, somebody help me out, is that right? The Dutch colonized Cameroon. Can somebody help me with that? They speak French there as well, and what I'm getting to, you may be able to help me out with this as well, folks. When they had slavery there, and I think the product was either cocoa or it was rubber, I think it was either one of those two that was being actually cultivated there. But I'm getting to the point of this. When slaves, captive peoples, were in fact then disciplined, they cut off limbs. Does anybody follow what I'm saying? Can you help me out here with this? And so if I was accused of taking something or not doing something as fast as I should have done, then they cut off a hand or they cut off a leg if I ran away. And I'm told today, according to my friend, that when you go into this country today, you can see evidence of folks without limbs. And some of them, again, are still folks who have grown up, at least on the tail end, right, of this kind of government in their country. Remember now, they were already civilized before folks got there. And that's what makes me just so, what a missed opportunity for we as human beings to be in a place where we could then reap the benefits of the riches from culture and from knowledge and from science and from all kinds of things. As a result of that, then we, I think, have a dearth of those kind of things in certain part of the world, in my opinion.
So that brings us to white supremacy, and me being from India, also colonized, for similar things. I think they were, if you look at Indian history, Indian history that I studied was through the colonized lens. It was what the British left us. And so I had to do my own learning as I was growing up because I was like, wait, this doesn't make sense. And so we were told there were only warring states, people were uncivilized, the kings would sell their thing. Yes, maybe there were people who were greedy, who they're human, who isn't, right? But that's how everything was portrayed in this viewpoint. And then when you flip it and you're like, wait, our brains are colonized. We're thinking in that same way. And when I came to the US for like, oh, you speak English so well. I was like, yes, because India was colonized. So that's what the British left us, because obviously our 133 languages weren't good enough. So we had to learn English. So anyway, but before I digress and get all passionate about it, it just comes from the white supremacist, like the culture of thinking they're supreme over anything else, and everything else was uncivilized. Anything was below them, beneath them. And so let's bring it back to the US and talk about today's white supremacy culture and why we feel it might be like feeling worse at this point and compare, like just with last week's thing in Buffalo and event in.
So look, white supremacy has been around forever. This is not a new concept. I think there are four things when we're talking about white supremacy. Or four tenets is kind of how we define it and stuff. So whites should have dominance over people of color or other backgrounds, other non-white, anybody who is considered non-white to them. Whites want to live in a society that's whites only. That's kind of number two. Number three, white people should have their own culture kind of in quotes, and that is superior to all other cultures that exist. And the fourth aspect is that they believe white people are genetically superior to other people. That's sort of the four basic tenets that are considered white supremacy. And there are a lot of other factors within it, a lot of other ideology, but those are kind of the four premises that you need to think of. Most white supremacists today, they believe that the white race is in danger of extinction. And everybody else, people coming to the United States, are coming to take over the great replacement theory, which I'm more than happy to talk about as we kind of delve into it. We can definitely get into that. I wrote down some notes on that because I think it's kind of important. And they also believe at their core, white supremacists, that everything that is going on in the world is controlled and manipulated by the Jews. That is the core of it, which then leads to everything else within racism, Islamophobia, anti-AAPI hate, against the Indian American community. I mean, every other type of community, their core ideology is based in anti-Semitism, that the Jews are controlling everything in the world, and we are controlling everybody else around us. But what they also mean by that is white presenting a white passing Jews also in many respects, because there is obviously Jews of color as well, and they didn't necessarily factor that into that. So that is also just something to keep in mind. So I think that's kind of how when we're looking at this conversation.
I spoke to Carol Crawford, who was the head of the Klan in North Carolina, and conversation, right? But what he actually talked about was, I don't have anything against black people. We should not be together.
What did you say?
What he said was this.
What did you just say?
I'll say it again. He said that I don't have anything against black people. I just think they ought not be together.
Thank you.
And so we were talking about, again, him coming to Raleigh, which is the capital of North Carolina, to do a rally. And I was the person in to making sure that nothing happened, and sort of protect everybody's rights to speak and have the opportunity to petition and to demonstrate. At the same time, I made it clear to him that what I did not want to have happen is somehow that would be promoting his particular way of thinking about us carrying out our charge. And so the idea of white supremacy, in my mind anyway, comes out of this notion that, and by the way, those of us who are people of faith probably are the chief reason as to why this has gotten an amount of legs to it than maybe it should have gotten. Because even in the course of slavery, we were able to rationalize how you treat someone in the most demeaning and inhumane way possible as a human being. We have right now our Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission here in Montgomery County. And that commission is put together to recognize that in Montgomery County, we have 3 people who were lynched here in our county. One of them happened right in front of a church in Poolsville. And after the lynching took place, folks went there into service. So it's that understanding that there is something that is innate, there's something that is biological, that put in place then a white structure that somehow or another was always going to be superior to than those of, in this case, Black folks specifically. And so I think that what has happened is that it begins to gain momentum shortly after Reconstruction, when there seemed to be then a time and an effort to begin to put Black folks in office and political positions. And by the way, I should tell you too, we have not had as many Black officials in positions of leadership in this country's history since 1817. And check me out, man. Go back, you can Google it, right? You can say stove, you can check it out. Since 1870, folks. And so shortly after that period of time sort of waned, became this idea then that they began to take something from us. I mean, jobs were a little tough to come by. There's a period of time in which there was already a great sense of need for all folks right after the war. White folks in particular began then to see Blacks seemingly gain some progress. And then here comes then again this idea, wait a minute now, this is our piece, this is our country. I remember when you were a slave, I mean, you worked for me. How do you deal with that? Well, I did deal with it very, very well. And so then began then the whole issue of, as you may know, people like the Klan and other kinds of white extremist groups began to come along at that point in time. But the idea again is that you have no business being seen as a person equal to myself. In fact, Abraham Lincoln, then, go back and check him out, that was his intent to suggest then that Blacks were equal to, again, whites. And so when we look at this whole picture, this is a whole sort of feeling that somehow or another that there is, again, this one way of living and thinking and acting is better than anything else that exists on the planet. And we gotta figure out how to work that through. Oh, by the way, Belgium was the country. It was not that it was Belgium. That's why the French thing came. You got me on track. Thank you.
So do you want to talk a little more about the defacement theory? So kind of leads straight into.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So, Buffalo. I'm looking down because it was really I do this for a living. You know, I work for the Anti-Defamation League. We have a dual mission. You know, stop the defamation of the Jewish people and for justice and fair treatment to all. I am extremely passionate about this on a personal level, not just because of what I do. And even though I see a lot of evil, I mean that evil and horrific stuff on a day-to-day basis, every time a larger scale type of event happens, you know, we go into work mode, all of us, you know, my colleagues in New York literally flew up to Buffalo, we're on the ground there with the community and stuff. I mean, but it does rock you to your core because you're going, how, again? El Paso, Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Poway, Charlottesville. I mean, I could, you know, keep naming some of these major events and stuff. And what it comes down to, all of them, when we're talking about white supremacy, is what's called the Great Replacement Theory. And I just want to read you kind of a definition. So the Great Replacement Theory argues that Jews are responsible for non-white immigration into the United States and that the non-white immigrants will eventually replace the white race. Now, I didn't just call it the Great Replacement Theory, I called it the Great Replacement Conspiracy Theory. Why? So this was largely rhetoric for many, many years, going back through history. It was something that was just sort of, you know, kind of like an underbelly, so to speak. But unfortunately, what has changed, so back to one of your very first questions, where we are today, it's become mainstream. So we can look at a lot of things in recent years, but if we go all the way back 5 years ago, it's almost the 5-year anniversary of Charlottesville. You know, we're here in Maryland, not that far away. So, and this is actually the region that I represent for ADL. I work in DC office. We cover Maryland, DC, Virginia, North Carolina. So this hit our office. So it really hit home. And for those of us who live here in the region, you know, the DMV, is, you know, we like to say and stuff, it really kind of, how Charlottesville, seriously, like of all places, it went back to Confederate, them trying to take down a Confederate statue, and people, no, excuse me, right-wing extremists and white supremacists dressed in khakis and golf shirts or polo shirts. So not white hoods, you know, not the KKK of the years ago and stuff. What some of you are wearing today, march through the streets chanting, Jews will not replace us, or they will not replace us. They kind of interchanged both of those things. And so this has become mainstream because there are people on news stations, media stations, Tucker Carlson. Okay, everybody knows who that is. He has a following. It's all over Fox News. He himself has said it, Laura Ingraham. That's just some from Fox News. We've heard it from a lot of other elected officials. Currently, people, see, this is what happens when you're having a very difficult conversation. It starts storming. But that's what's been happening. And it is, you know, there are people with, you know, social media today. This isn't just stuff that's on paper. Like, there are conspiracy theories, misinformation and disinformation, two different types of things that are out there that people are believing. You know, they believe that anybody, you know, who is not like them, you know, and I'm talking about people who believe in the white replacing the great replacement theory and white supremacy, that everybody else, it's everybody else's fault for all the ills of the world, is kind of him giving you some generalizations and stuff. This was the manifesto of what happened in Buffalo. He specifically, a good majority of the manifesto was fueled in anti-Semitism. And then he specifically chose, he was either going to go to a school, to possibly a Jewish institution, or an area where there was a lot of Black Americans. And so he decided he scaped out, he kind of looked out the supermarket, where it's an area where there's a lot of people in the Black community who shop there. And he shot people in the parking lot and went right into the supermarket. And 10 of the people out of the 13 were Black. Actually, it may have been 11, and I think 10 were actually murdered, and my numbers may be a little off there and stuff. Yeah, so he specifically went there because he believed it was the Jewish community's fault for what the Black people do, which is insane. It is asinine when you hear that. But he's not the first. You know, again, Tree of Life, you know, when the shooter went into Pittsburgh, he specifically believed in the same things, and he believed the Jewish community there, that one, was that we were responsible for bringing in immigrants. And so that's why he targeted. There was a lot of things going on related to immigration at the time. HIAS, which is called the Hebrew, I always forget the IS. Thank you, Society. I have close friends who work there and stuff who are very, you know, helping bringing in refugees and immigrants to the United States for the American dream. And that's why he targeted a synagogue. So this is something we are seeing mainstream now. It is not just in the, you know, the what I like to call the underbelly, the ills of the evilness. This is everyday life now, and most of this is not even people who are part of white supremacist groups, like very specific, like, you know, they're not part of the Proud Boys or, you know, the Boogaloo Boys or the KKK or neo-Nazis. These are usually single individuals who are just getting all their information. A lot of it from gaming, which we can talk all about gaming and what that has actually done to society. So this is what happened in Buffalo, and it's, again, like, as I said, think about all the amount that has happened since 2017. It's like every year or every 6 months this is happening. So sorry to put that in a little bit of a downer, but that's the reality, unfortunately.
And so
considering it's the civil rights movement was supposed to have been the next level, right? And then do you think Obama coming into power kind of put things on an overdrive from the other side? It's like,
No, it was, let me not at all suggesting that was not an important historical moment. in this country's history. Absolutely, no question about that. We really were able to get to a point where we looked at, in that case, Senator Obama's credentials and what we thought he could lead us. And I think people made a decision along those lines. I think people were okay, feeling good about that. But I think we were a bit naive to suggesting that somehow that was going to be the end of all that we experienced over these many, many years. And quite frankly, there's a number of Black leaders that I've always had a bit of a challenge with, because when you have someone who is on the other side from the Senate perspective and leadership, who was suggesting that his number one goal was going to be having a one-term president, which meant that there was nothing he was going to do to be supportive of any of his policies or his proposed legislation. It was just seemed to me that to expect anything different from him, I'm talking to the president now, was really unrealistic. And when you got folks who were actually in the White House who were bent on sabotaging almost at every turn what was going on inside, even with those who were long-termers there, beyond folks who were in and out from an administration standpoint, those who will be there after this administration is gone, those folks I'm talking about, who had a very, very, I think, very specific sort of reason for being the way they were. So I think that it was unrealistic for us to think then that all of a sudden we're going to have this major shift in how we look at the world. There were people who were seething that he was elected, vis-a-vis the whole issue with the vote now. We're still going on, come on, gang. You know, if you have 61 different trials on the same issue, and you prevail in 60 of them, you know, any other issue, right? We've been going a long time ago. I've moved ahead, in other words, what I'm trying to say, a long time ago in terms of looking at other kinds of things, but we're still stuck there. And they're good people. They are friends of yours. They're your neighbors. They are your coworkers who are buying into this stuff. That's what blows me away. I mean, again, not bad people. There's some folks on the far right of these issues, and they're kind of there by themselves. But there's some folks who, you know, who legitimately and know they don't believe this and are still carrying it forward. So I believe that part of this has to do then with this whole idea that we've got such a long way to go. And what the last administration did, it's not a political statement at all, as we saw with other kind of things that happened to us. It just simply then brought to the surface many of the ideals that have been floating around this country for a long time, and nobody was able to articulate those ideas, at least in a national kind of way, in a prominent position to do so, that you couldn't just pass it off as he or she being some sort of kook or some sort of person who just, again, far right in their thinking. President of the United States then allows you, or majority leader, whoever you want to call it, right, allows you at least to think then that this has some merit, some credibility that's being stated, as it were. And so I think that what has happened as a result of that, we got law to speak, that we have finally got to a place we elect a Black president. And so now we are at a point now where we can finally say we reached the point of looking at each other, back to the earlier question, you know, with this idea of doing unto others you had to do unto you. We thought we were there in that anti-racist kind of mode. We were not. We just were not. Because what we did not deal with, folks, was the issue of truth. We didn't deal with truth. And until we deal with truth in this country, and I mean the bad, the good, the ugly, we can't get to the other side of it. That's called reconciliation, by the way, right? We can't get there. And we thought that in one full swoop of one election, we could turn back over 300 years of what we've been. It's no way, come on, gang. And so at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves that, you know, what has to happen now in the context of where we are today? Buffalo, folks, if we again allow, and we're not going to do that by the way here in Montgomery County, we are going to do something, hope you'll join me, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But if we allow that to be just another story in the news, where are we? What kind of people are we? I mean, to have that be something that just happened, regardless of who the persons were. And I will tell you, I'm guilty as anybody else is, because we have it so often, you sometimes become numb, all right? Sometimes you become almost indifferent toward that. It's a bad word to use about what I'm talking about, but we do. But when they start giving the names of the persons involved and their relationships to the community that they in fact lived in, and their relationship to relatives and work they were doing in the community to serve each other in the community, it turned for me. It turned for me. And I would hope that we get to some level in this country that we have to say to ourselves that this is just not acceptable. It just isn't. This is not how we do things here. And so I would hope then that as we look at these things going forward, that we come to some understanding about that truth, that we got to have those hard conversations. And white members of this community, and white members of this audience, you've got to hear some of these stories. They're not bad people. I know you weren't there, but you've been the beneficiary of all that happened. And so you got to come back and say to yourself, okay, now let's look at this story. Let's look at this history. But I will tell you that until you allow yourself to be able to feel that truth, and for those of us who are Black, we got a similar truth, but not the same one. Ours is a little bit different, at least from my perspective. But what I'm saying is that until that happens, we will always be in this, I believe, this sort of place where we make 3 or 4 steps forward, elect a Black president, elect a Black vice president, female, and then we step backwards because we haven't really dealt with the issue. And you all know, if you ever deal with someone who's got an addiction to something, right? What do we tell him or her? You gotta deal with the addiction first, don't you? You gotta get it broken down to the very essence of what that's all about, and then somehow begin then to build back in a way that allows yourself then to be the actual person who is the beneficiary of that truth, not hung by it, not held in prison by it, not forever feeling guilty about it. That gets us nothing. Truth, I want to get to the other side. How do we reconcile? Because then we begin to live as a society.
And getting to the other side brings me to the conversation about allyship between the Black and Jewish communities in the US.
You want me to go? Sure. So I would say this, there is a long-standing history between the communities. I really actually wish I had some recent stats and stuff, but there's a lot of, I would say, interfaith, intergroup, interracial type of programs together, community things, all of that, that's kind of going on. A lot of it is we build on both of the communities' shared histories of tragedies. I think that's another way of looking at it, and triumph. I know we're talking about some negative stuff, but the reality is both communities have triumphed through and over bigotry, that has been directed towards the Jewish community and the Black community. And, there are a lot of organizations doing what they call BlackJewish Alliances, where we kind of want to create a world that's free of bias, prejudice, hate, not just against the Black community, not just against the Jewish community, against everybody. We have a saying, all hate is interrelated, and it's all equally serious and damaging. So it's not yours is worse than mine kind of thing. It needs to be everybody, the allyship, everybody working together. And I will tell you that for Jews of color, it is even more difficult. And I have some very close friends, and I, like I said, I do this work, but I talked with them even before this, just even though I do this on, I was like, how are you feeling after Buffalo? Like, I want to be there for you. I want to give you a space to talk about it and stuff, because it's like I hate to say it, but like a dual impact in many respects on them. And look, I'm Ashkenazi. My family is, my great-grandparents are from Russia, Romania, and Hungary. I am Ashkenazi through and through, but there are Sephardic Jews, there are Mizrahi Jews, who are not white passing or white presenting. I am, as they say, I could pass as Irish. I hear that many, many times. I've been asked that a lot actually over the years. So for me, I have faced anti-Semitism myself. My own synagogue here in Montgomery County was vandalized many years ago. People like Director Stowe and others were there for us when it happened. So I've seen it, I've seen it through my kids' eyes and stuff. I know what it's like, but I will tell you, walking down the street or driving my car, unless somebody, or walking down the street, like, I'm walking maybe to synagogue or they can see my Jewish star, I'm not going to get targeted as much. And that's something that for many people has also been hard to recognize. It was not something I was brought up with. I grew up in Long Island, New York, in a very mixed area, a lot of Jews, a lot of non-Jews, a lot of people from all races and stuff. But Nowadays, where I grew up, it's actually not great. You know, unfortunately, the community and stuff, what that's changed, and people have to reckon and look for that reconciliation and stuff. And so we need to have a conversation. A lot of what, you know, we were saying, this was before Charlottesville, you know, this stuff. This was before 2016, before the election. This is not something that hasn't existed, but we have not done enough. And in my opinion, we have failed our society in many ways. We have failed our kids today. We don't do enough education about the Holocaust, about slavery, about genocide in general. All of that, it is not, and we live in the state of Maryland, and it is not a mandate in history books for many of those subjects. This is Maryland, and yet it is still not. And in Montgomery County, there are a lot of issues that are happening on a regular basis too. And we have a community that has stood up in many respects and said, no place for hate here, but it is still happening. So you just being here today, honestly, and just listening and figuring out what can I do. You know, Buffalo just happened, so it's on everybody's mind, but I was just on Monday, I was at a dedication for Lieutenant Collins. Many of you may remember, he was murdered on UMD's campus 5 years ago by a kid who held white supremacist ideologies. And I was with the Collins parents, and I was with Susan Bro, whose daughter Heather Heyer was murdered in Charlottesville. And Susan got up there, and it has stuck with me because it just was recent. She said, 3 weeks from now, most people are not going to be talking about Buffalo anymore. Mm-hmm. Which is why she's still talking about Charlottesville. She's out there advocating, started a foundation, which is why Dawn and Rick Collins are still talking about how their son did not step left. And what I mean by that is because the kid who came up to him said, step left, get out of my way, or I'm gonna hurt you. And he said no, because the friends that he was with was trying to protect them as well. So that's the type of people, like I said, I do this for a living, but they give me hope because they're working together. Heather Heyer was a white woman who was there protesting what was happening in Charlottesville. Lieutenant Collins, a black young man who was set to go to the Army, both targeted by racism and anti-Semitism and other forms of hate and bigotry. If we are not together as allies and upstanders, and we just sort of like, okay, it happened, I'm really sad, I'll go to a vigil, we don't take action after that, nothing's ever gonna change. That's my little speech for today. I didn't talk about a lot of other things, but that's the bottom line I want you to walk away with in many respects.
Well, we are working on a lot of areas. I came here from Columbus, Ohio. I was very much involved in the Jewish community there, particularly as it relates then to education about the Holocaust, etc. And one of the things that we talked about there was how we in fact can get more involved in each of us understanding that past that many of us think that we know about. And as a result of that, I think one of the problems we run into is that we don't know as much as we think we know about each other's past. I'll just say this to you, that one of the things that was, Dr. King said this, the movement could not have happened without then people like Rabbi Abraham Herschel, as an example. But for the Jews who were already there down south, many of them did not step up. Many of them that in fact were engaged in the particular movement came from up north, and including Rabbi Herschel, obviously, answered the call on voting rights in Selma, Alabama. That brought not only himself, but also all those persons who were engaged in that process. I thought it was very, very powerful. And then the other thing, of course, is that once the movement will move forward in terms of that, King comes back and says that in Chicago, as you may know, his failed attempts on the issue of housing in Chicago, they ended up renting 4 rooms there. And those rooms were actually owned, the landlord in that case was actually owned by a Jewish landlord who was charging them $20 more than he was charging white tenants. So there was this ongoing tension that somehow or another happened at a time when I asked my colleagues here, what occurred? What was the issue here locally that somehow or another we don't, again, embrace each other like we should? And so we've begun a series of conversation between Black clergy and our rabbinic team here, rabbinic council, I should say, here in the county. And we're all about the business of trying to figure out and talk through some of these issues to kind of figure out what each of us is as it relates then to some of the concepts and some of the thoughts. So that's going on, which is a good thing. The other thing, however, is how do we get here? How do we get to a place where we're having that conversation? We don't, in fact, go to your particular event. You don't come to mine unless you're invited. And so we've got some work to do. And I think that as people came out of the civil rights movement, I'm not so sure what actually happened. I want to know myself. If anybody out there has an answer, I'd love to hear that. But we began to be more estranged than we were before. And we still have not quite gotten back that momentum unless there's being ushered in by an event or circumstance that kind of brings us back together again. And so anyway, I just want to put that out there. I talk about it more and more. I'll see you have some leading behavior. Margaret, I'm going to congratulate you anyway because you were here for 2 hours and more, I understand, for a very provocative, very powerful play. So I applaud you for staying around as long as you have. I want to say one quick thing about Monday. If you are, again, available to join us, we are having a vigil. We'll begin Montgomery County's response to what happened in Buffalo. It's taking place at Mount Calvary Baptist Church at 608 North, I think it is Horner, Horners Street, Horner Lane rather, just beyond the metro station there in Rockville, one of our old historic neighborhoods.
Actually, if you can send me
Will do.
information, I can email it to you.
Very good, very good. Noontime tomorrow. Hope you'll be there.
Yeah,
Question?
questions, yes.
And the information for the vigil, I can email it to all the people who attended today's show. So,
I think this is important. You asked the question, what can you do? I think what you could do is bring to the community plays like we just saw, because a lot of being uncomfortable has to do with lack of experience and understanding the situation. And there were some issues that maybe some people felt uncomfortable with or not. But at any rate, they're important because change occurs only when we're aware and we learn the differences of people. We respect people, we understand people, we have empathetic to people. So this play was wonderful, and I just want you to get more of it here. All right.
thank you. Are there any other questions?
I'm not sure who's in this audience, but my guess is there are many racists here. There are not many anti-Semites here. But if I was an anti-Semitic racist, what would you two say to me that you think would move me at all? What's your message to somebody who's like this?
You know, I've actually been asked this question before, and my answer probably changes each time and stuff. So you may not be anti-Semitic, you may not be racist. There may be things that all of us do, though, that are racist, that are anti-Semitic, and you may not realize it and stuff. So if you are somebody who is what we would consider real, more extreme anti-Semite and racist, Islamophobic, anti-LGBT, I mean, they're gonna probably hate everybody. Like, let's just call it what it is. First of all, they're not gonna be sitting in this audience. But no, I understand. And actually, Richard Spencer, I'm sure everybody knows who Richard Spencer is. So he, you know, there are times when he was going and giving presentations on college campuses and stuff, academic freedoms, freedom of speech, all that kind of stuff. And many people went to try and talk to him and stuff. And what he would tell you is actually one of the things that you said is, oh, I'm not against you, I just don't want to be with you. We shouldn't be together, you know, in society, because he's got that clean cut image and stuff. So what do we need to, so this is not a direct answer to you, because I don't know that talking to somebody like that is necessarily going to change them. There are reformed, there are people, there's actually somebody who I have talked to, I was at a rally, I think it was last summer. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he's actually the nephew of David Duke. And he actually is out there, Derek something, and he's actually out there now talking about being a reformed white supremacist and stuff. And you have to get to the people before that, though, in many respects. So I actually think, like, what would I say to them? I mean, look, I would try and talk to them. I would try and tell them about my history and stuff. It depends on where somebody is almost, though, like in their journey. I would say, I actually think we have to get them before that, because there are people on the cusp. That's the people we really need to reach more than the people who really are out there who are already planning an attack. Now, there are laws we need to put in place for that. There are domestic terrorism laws we're working on. We need to strengthen our hate crimes laws, all of that kind of stuff. But I actually think it's our education system that we need to be working on more. We need to mention gaming earlier. I'm going to bring this up now, because what we are finding and what ADL has done research on is the fact that there are a lot of young white males between the ages of 14 to 17, most of them are around 15 or 16, who are in these chat rooms that exist in these gaming, I have a 14-year-old and she's always playing it, so I've, all these gaming chat rooms and stuff, who are being drawn in, and a lot of them come from very good homes that are not racist homes, that are not anti-Semitic homes, but they're believing all of this stuff that's being fed to them, their minds. We need to get to those kids first before they end up like the 18-year-old who just shot everybody up in Buffalo. So
And
it's
what
not.
would you say to them when you got to them?
Well, so then it's a much larger thing. I mean, I don't know that I have a direct answer, but you actually almost need to listen in many respects. You need to listen to what is in their mind. What do they believe? And you need to try and counter it with facts. We have a saying, First Amendment is one of the best things out there. I will try and true defend the First Amendment. Hate speech is protected under the First Amendment. So we have a saying, what do you do with that? Now, there's hate speech when it can incite violence, and then you're outside of the purview of the First Amendment. However, most of the time, if you see hate speech, you want to counter it with good speech. And so you want to talk to that individual, and you want to find out, what are they thinking? What kind of conspiracy theories are they believing? And you need to counter it and show that. That's how many people who are reformed white supremacists, that's what they talk about. Somebody came and listened to me. They heard what I was saying. I thought everybody else was responsible except myself for, not having a job or whatever it is. So you need to try and, it's not just like a one-word thing. It's an ongoing conversation you have to have with them. You have to counter the stuff they think, but sometimes you have to actually show them love, which is really, really hard. I know that sounds crazy, but there is, love thy enemy, or keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. To a certain extent, that is part of it, because sometimes some of these are neglected. I mean, there's all, things, the theories and stuff as to why people end up like this. But I really still truly believe you need to listen to understand, particularly if they want to sit down and talk about it. So as I say, it's not like there's not an exact thing. I don't know what I would say. But that's kind of the strategy I would probably personally use.
I just want to add, yeah, please.
I just want to add here, the New York Times, one of the reporters did this whole series of following gaming and YouTube video watcher who got how they ended up on the right-wing conspiracy path because of the similar video algorithm that kept popping up, and then it's how he kind of retraced himself by unintentionally clicking on a different video and going down a different rabbit hole. And actually, it's called the rabbit hole now that I think about it. It's called the rabbit hole. New York Times. It's a few episodes. It's mind-boggling. I would recommend listening to the podcast.
There's one person too, sir, if you ever get a chance to hear him, Darryl Davis. Darryl is a musician, world-renowned jazz, blues and jazz, right? Here in Maryland, but he has, I'm gonna say converted, or at least turned around. I think the number is now is over 250 Klans persons. Through much of what Meredith said at the very end of her comments, and that is to say he does do that listening, gives it that kind of understanding where the person's coming from, and then allows them to experience, not just hear the rhetoric, but experience something different. And he gets collected. They've actually given him their clan robes and so forth as a result of that. So he's got them collected because, and he just kind of stumbled into this. And so if you ever hear about him being in town, or hear him, he's speaking, tremendous sort of way of dealing with the world around him. He's making the change. He's actually making the difference in real time.
Darryl Davis?
Darryl Davis. Yeah.
He has some
So
stuff
yes,
online you can look
I
at.
just want to mention to you, there's a classic example of change, not 20 miles from here. The city of Columbia, Maryland, was built on the basis of racial understanding and enforced by the developer. I was one of the developers of it, the Rouse Company. You have a classic example of 100,000 people in one community that we made sure if you went out with the program, you were out. And it has worked very successfully in Columbia, Maryland.
Well, you're also here, right? You're also here in Montgomery County. I believe. I live in Montgomery Village. I think that's one of your.
Yes.
And also down in Virginia, Western Virginia,
That's
right?
right. But it's always about relationships.
Yes.
You have got to have a relationship. It's very difficult to hate somebody that you have to your home.
No question.
It's always, beg your pardon, here's my wife. What? Oh, yeah, I've been doing this for almost 40 years. The Hebrews is an organization that she named. We are 25 Jewish guys and 25 black guys. The glue was golf. We started playing golf together. We started getting into all kinds of things as a result of that. And we're still going now. You know, every year we go away somewhere and play golf, but we have very serious conversations about serious issues, and we are now in a relationship. And that's the tough part, keeping it together.
You said it so well, sir, and I was going to say that one of the things I mentioned by way of tomorrow, we've got a piece called the Montgomery County Way.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to share that with everybody tomorrow and certainly the general public as well. But it lists a series of ideals and tenets that we as a community need to live by, or at least to consider to live by. And so we're going to be encouraging all of you to actively seek out opportunities to have these kinds of conversations and these kinds of relationship building opportunities.
Be brave.
And frank and open conversations, because one of the things I say to my black friends is this, is that if I invite, again, my white brother in, I've got to make darn sure that I create a safe environment for him to ask the question. And sometimes that's going to be maybe a dumb question, right? But the way you get an answer to any question is to be safe enough, feel secure enough to ask it, and to be taken serious that I want to know the answer. And so it is about that. Having this opportunity then to have these honest, brave, courageous conversations. So we'll be asking tomorrow that again, community-wide, do something, find a group, create a group, start a group, wherever it may end up being, but you have to be intentional about this. It was Buffalo Saturday ago. It could very easily be somewhere in Montgomery County. And so the way we keep that from being a reality, hopefully, is that we are always on guard. We're always in motion, trying to figure out how we, in fact, make our community better, deal with our community places where we know we need that opportunity for that truth telling I mentioned early on. But at the same time, allow enough room in there to move to another place, to the reconciliation place. And so I hope that you may hear this tomorrow. If you're not able to hear it, it'll be live streamed, by the way. And so that you will take an opportunity then to, in fact, do something, create something. Again, be a part of this activity that's already underway, that may be underway already in your communities. Because right now, it is the indifference that will end up keeping us from progressing the way we need to in Montgomery County. And here's the deal, right? In Montgomery County, folks, we have a legitimate chance. Well, really, we have a legitimate chance in making a difference in modeling for the world what can happen when people, again, are on one accord on this particular issue we're talking about. There are some cities in America, wow, very difficult.
So I want to first thank you. If nobody ever said thank you today, thank you, because it's people like you who, again, give me hope for the future because you have been doing this so long. So if I can leave you with sort of four, I like things in threes and fours. And for anybody listening at home still and stuff, we have a moral imperative to learn, to listen, to build awareness, and to speak out. Those are four key things that we can do. And even though we've talked a lot about a lot of evil things and stuff, I still am a true believer there's a lot more good than there is evil out there. And that we can combat together systemic racism, going back to the very beginning, all forms of bigotry, where whatever it is, all forms of discrimination, wherever it is. We, as a Jewish community, I'm going to say this, racial justice is a Jewish issue. It always has been. So to bring it back sort of to the play, and thinking about that and stuff, it is not one or the other. It is something we have a long-standing history between our communities, and it's something that we as a society, some things, and there are a lot of reasons I think we could talk about why things fell apart. So what? We'll come back again. And we've been doing that. And there are a lot of people in the community who are doing that. And again, so it's learn, listen, build awareness, and speak out. Those four things together will make a change.
My last word is just intentional. It has got to be intentional. It will not happen being orchestrated by someone else and he or she's going to do it. They've always done it in the past. It has got to be an intentional step on everybody's part.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Weisel. Thank you so much. And we'll be back with more of these conversations as each new play brings us new themes. But the thing to look out for is July 29th and 30th is our Just Arts, which we're basing around food, the food and social justice festival. So the July 29th is a community dinner. We're calling it Dining on Stories, where the Sandy Spring Slave Museum historian and then Tom Farquhar from the Quaker community here in Sandy Spring and a Piscataway tribe member will be coming to talk about food and culture. And then we're going to have like a community potluck where we're going to bring food and have actually a conversation over the food. So like you said, bringing people together. Thank you. Have a good evening, and I'm glad the rain stopped.